everyone. Welcome to the Signal Room, where we decode the signals that are impacting global communication. I'm Vincent. I'm here with my usual panelists, Uda, Jonas, and Karina. First, let's check where everybody is. I'm in Barcelona at home for a change. Jonas, where are you traveling today?
I'm in Berlin, Germany this week. Super hot.
I'm in Seattle, Washington.
I'm at home in Wisconsin. We have 95 degrees today. So it's going to be an interesting day. I watered the plants first thing when I woke up because it's going to be a very hot and humid day. No complaints, though.
It's very hot here today as well. Okay, let's just jump straight into it, guys. I think, as usual, we start with our top of mind signals. What have we seen over the last week or two that's been interesting for us? Jonas, do you want to jump in first? Give us a kick off on this.
Sure, Vincent. So I've observed several signals sort of pointing in the same direction over the last week or so. And those signals all point towards the boundary between the localization industry and the rest of AI and tech blurring. So we've talked a lot about orchestration of models in the Signal Room, but also in general in the industry over the last while. And then one of the biggest AI news recently, I think last week, was around Sakana AI in Japan and the results they achieved on benchmarking, allegedly on par with Mythos from Anthropic, which is interesting, sort of on that topic of the last episode of sovereign AI and a player in Japan achieving those levels of performance. But the important part here from the signal perspective is that Sakana is orchestrating models with a model trained for orchestration as such, rather than a sort of a core foundation model. So orchestration is kind of the signal here. The other signal in that space is automation anywhere building a globalization operations agent. So basically an agent for orchestration of localization and globalization. And then we had a conversation with an industry analyst last week. We had a briefing, and one of the main questions they asked was around how we're responding to solutions like Zendesk's translation as a feature. So again, kind of blurring the line between globalization and the rest of the tech industry. So I think it's interesting to see those signals all come around the same time, combining orchestration and blurring the line. And it sort of begs the question, when will we see low companies go beyond orchestration of localization and go into other areas of tech? And I think maybe the spoiler alert here is that it's already happening in some cases. So an interesting trend to keep an eye on.
Well, mergers and acquisitions are happening all the time, but I found this one interesting. So you've heard probably DeepL acquired Mixhalo, the live audio startup, and opened the Bay Area office. And I felt it was quite the strategic move because DeepL built its name in text, right? And they do have their voice-to-voice suite, but now they're entering the arena of live in-person translations at conferences, at events, which I think is one of the hardest venues in our industry, if not the hardest. So they already had the voice-to-voice suite, but now Mixhalo gives them the room, I guess. But the sharpest detail was Mixhalo CEO's statement. He essentially said that he felt that the big LLMs are going to start encroaching on his rates. So his best exit or his best strategy was to team up with an MT or a solid translation company to sustain the next era. So it would be interesting to track the rationale behind mergers and acquisitions for the next few months.
Do you think that we're going to end up with some sort of megacorps? Do you think that we'll end up with loads of mergers and acquisitions over the coming years and end up with fewer but bigger players who cover a broad suite?
Certainly. It's already happening. And I want to go back to Jonas's comment around the Zendesk translation feature. It's not actually homegrown. It's also outsourced, but they integrate it as part of their suite, and they offer it as a combined or a one-stop shops kind of service to their clients. Like, why do you need to use a translation company? Because we can turn on this feature. So companies are realizing that translation is front and center. Many companies started way back. Adobe Experience Manager had a translation plugin 10 years ago. But now I think it's more prevalent, and they're considering it as part of the build. And small companies cannot sustain the next wave, and they're gonna start reducing their rates and crunching their numbers. So better join forces with a niche service to be able to support clients and buyers.
Jonas, I see you nodding along there. Is that kind of overlap?
I think, I definitely agree that some of those translation features that we see in non-language players are integrations of other providers. But I also, it's sort of interesting that what I mentioned DeepL from that other perspective of M&A, because I do remember, I was trying to look it up now as what I was speaking, I do remember them talking about actually doing orchestration outside of localization as well, building models for other areas. I think they are an example of the signals that I was talking about, and it sort of overlaps in this case again. Maybe again, blurring the lines between these different signals in tech and loc.
Interesting. Karina, what about you? What have you been noticed while your travels? Anything interesting?
Nothing from my travels. But maybe an overdue signal is we've shifted, the industry from buying labels to buying environments. And I think this is something that we'll see penetrate every kind of market. So instead of, the conversations that we're having with the frontier labs are no longer kind of label this data set or we want this data set labeled. It's we want to purchase this environment that has acted, failed, tested, and been proven. And I think that that's something to think about strategically when we start to look at loc and go to market with comms, because we're no longer looking at annotation and labeling as a straightforward buy and sell kind of marketplace. We're into environments. And I think that leads into a lot of different conversations, especially when it comes to law changes and governance and those kinds of pieces. So yeah, that's my signal is the environments piece is very much alive and well, which means agents are on their way more than we'll ever know. So that's my signal for this week.
That's an interesting one. I think we'll talk a little bit more around the governance around that and in the main topic, but I do think it's definitely an interesting point we're at. I think we're starting to be at an inflection point where things are reaching a certain level and the change is inevitable now. It's really just a question of the time frames things are going to take for general mass consumption and acceptance. Kind of my own, even though this is an agentic episode, my own signal is a little different this week. It's not really about agents. It's about this article I came across for dataland.art. And essentially, it seems like this crazy museum/art installation that's in Los Angeles at the moment. And it's essentially recreating environments using AI, using agents, using like all of the latest technology. So you're rigged up to a lot of sensors on your arms, etc. And the example that they were given was effectively they would bring you into the rainforest, for example. So that they would create, it seems a bit like the holodeck from Star Trek or something, that they would create a completely holistic environment around you, including smells, wind, all of the kind of constituent parts of it. And also that it's not a pre-planned exhibit where you kind of walk through it, free forms, it evolves around you. So it's a kind of unique one-off experience. I think it sounds pretty cool, like I suppose a bit like the Sphere in Vegas, but aimed more inwards at the person rather than a big mega thing. I think if I get to LA, I definitely want to have a look at it. But it did kind of bring up a little thing to me that I thought was interesting is, how do you localize that? There's no real, because it's going to be a unique experience every time for every person, how do you localize it? And I was kind of going, well, there may not be direct localization. Okay, so there might be some voiceover or some that sort of stuff. But what I do think would be important is cultural significance and cultural awareness. So, for example, what is it cool to be displaying in these environments? Would it need to have a different kind of profile if you were using it in certain countries? Would it look different in China than it would in America, for example? I think it's a very interesting concept to see, and I'd be kind of interested to see where where that goes. It'll just end up in another amusement arcade kind of ride, or is there actual real world usage in it? So that data land in LA, if anybody goes, send us a link and tell us more about it.
I think it's Vincent on that. I think it's kind of maybe overlapping a bit what you were talking about, Karina, right? That sounds like a great opportunity to capture human data, right?
I was just thinking, is it a data
Yeah.
capture factory?
Yeah, exactly. I wonder if you have to sign something when you go in. You sort of sign over the data that they capture to them. It could actually be a good model to
That's
collect.
funny. Yeah, I have seen some crazy video gamers setups where they do have those suits, like those exoskeleton suits, and like some video games are actually fully designed for that. So I can imagine it's kind of like an evolution of that. I can't imagine what the home setup would be for some of those, people.
Crazy.
But that sounds awesome. I would definitely do it. I mean, I went to Disney and I did like that. What was it, like California and it smells like orange? That was enough for me. Or like the Avatar ride. It's immersive. But this sounds like that on steroids. That sounds really cool though.
Well, if we get a chance to go to LA, next one of us there, maybe we check it out and do a report on one of the podcasts. So they were good signals. I do have another signal from our AI agent, but I'm going to hold off and use that as a trigger into our main conversation. So I think it's time to move quickly onto the quickfire. The usual rules apply: yes or no, or agree, disagree answers. But of course, one of us is going to be trying to put in a qualifier sentence. So we're fine with that, but basically, let's have a go. Okay. The first language service provider to go fully agent native, zero human project managers, zero human linguists in the production pipeline will be profitable within 12 months of launch. True or false? True.
False.
I'm going to be the person who expands. I read a really interesting article around how these startups are becoming profitable and kind of cooking the books. I think false too. I think that they'll present as profitable, but they won't be.
I think it depends on the use case, right? So for certain customers who just need straight up translation, it's going to be straightforward. So I think the qualifier, Vincent, was in your question or in the statement. The first doesn't mean that it's going to be the standard in the industry, but I'm sure there will be at least one.
I kind of agree with that. I don't think it'll necessarily be the first one, but for the right content stream and the right kind of automated workflow, I could see fully automated. I mean, I suppose we already have some very low touch or no touch human workflows already existing. We just don't have a whole LSP built around it. So yeah, I think it's possible if with the right content and with the right workflow. I think that'd be a go.
Can I out ourselves here quickly on this? So we obviously launched a new website, multilingualai.scientific.com. And on the homepage, we have a live translation little box, right? We leveraged some AI in our features of developing the website. And we have many people who work for us that speak different languages. And one of our French-speaking employees said to me, "This sounds AI generated, the translation." And I thought that was really interesting because obviously that's not our intention. We're human in the loop first and foremost, but the that piece, that trust piece that we continue to bring up and have in this conversation, I think is important. And, there's never going to be like one right way to say anything, but there's always going to be, I think, in this day and age, multiple ways to say something better. And so we weren't saying the best thing. We were saying maybe the most convenient or quick thing because we wanted to get live really quickly. But I thought that was really interesting feedback. And we obviously fixed it straight away. But to that point, right, if it's even our own, it was a tagline that's like 5 words long, but it's like, this doesn't sound human enough for me. It's like, okay, fair enough.
That's interesting. Actually, that came up as, I'll skip a couple of questions and come back to them because question number 4 in the quickfire actually was, enterprise clients will trust a single vendor agent stack for end-to-end localization more than they'll trust a multi-vendor agent ecosystem. And this is the kicker. Speed and accountability beat best of breed. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
think there were two parts to it, right? I disagree with both parts of it.
Okay. That's fair enough. Karina?
I think speed's important and I'm on the fence on that one. I'm on the fence.
The difference between marketing and quality management are two sides of the fence in
Two
one
sides
answer,
of the
I
fence.
think.
I know.
From a C-suite perspective, it isn't.
Yes, that's it,
At the
right?
division level, it is. And your
That's
question was
it.
about enterprise. So the decision is made at the C-suite level. And that's why I said disagree or agree.
Okay, that's fair enough. Well, let's have another enterprise question then. Some enterprise buyers will pay a premium for agentic localization workflows, not because the output is better, because of the speed of decision making is worth more than quality. So it covers the same thing.
Agree.
Agree. They are already doing that. Yeah. Now, will they regret it later on? Well, we have yet to see.
Okay, mid-market LSPs have one path to survival: become agent-native workflow companies or die. We do good translation with AI assistance is not a viable long-term strategy. Agree or disagree?
Depends on the time frame. I think long term, yes, for sure, 100%. Maybe not in the next 12 months, but over time, yes.
Agree.
Agree. But the agent conversations one that maybe I alluded to at the beginning, what's that environment look like? Depends on the output, right?
Yeah,
that's fair. Multi-agent negotiation, where one agent proposes a translation, another challenges cultural appropriateness, and a third adjudicates, will produce higher quality output than any single model, no matter how large, true or false.
100% true.
Agree.
I agree.
It's kind of come up before, but I'm interested to see if anyone's opinion has changed. Agentic workflows will make the concept of translation segments obsolete. Agents operate at the document, discourse, and intent level, and segmenting content for them actively reduces quality. True or false?
Agree.
I would agree.
Agree.
I think I agree with that one as well.
I'm curious, why do you disagree?
Because if you're forcing the LLM to translate at the segment level and it already has a memory, it's actually more accurate, especially in manufacturing and structured content. Because let's say you build an agent or a project in Copilot and you include all of the instructions. The instructions are there, the style guide are there, the attachments are there. If you go chat by chat, the memory will not carry over. But if you go segment by segment, then the memory will carry over. And I experienced this firsthand, not in translation, but in instructions. So I would say at the segment level, it's more tasking, it's more jarring, especially if you're dealing with thousands of words, but it's more accuracy for certain types of content.
Yeah, I think the key there is orchestrating it in a way that you still get that quality out of the TM, right? Even if it's not working at the segment level.
Which TM? If the TM is garbage in, garbage out, and it's too messy, or you have hundreds of duplicates and fuzzy matches, it's a problem too.
Do you think that by kind of relying on that chat mentality where you're kind of starting new chats to progress things along because of context window, do you think that that can be mitigated by how we send context through? Like if we're actually looking at taking rag matches, sending through a paragraph, sending through a reference of a whole document, so let's imagine the scenario where you're not paying by token, or at least you're not paying a third person by token. So you're running internal models where the token cost is extremely low. Can that challenge be mitigated by controlling what you send as a segment or as an instruction to the LLM? And perhaps within the self-contained project or the ecosystem of the group of files that you're trying to work with, that you control it at a higher level than a chat level?
Less chats is definitely better quality and better output. But what happens, and I think AI is teaching us, or the LLMs are teaching us, how to provide clear instructions. Because what's happening at this level is that we provide instructions a certain way, only to realize that we missed the point after the chat is complete. So you have to go back. Or sometimes your time expired and you have to log in again in 3 hours. So you start a different chat, or the system, kicks you out. You're starting a different chat. That chat does not carry over the previous chat. It relies on memory. So now I think AI is forcing us to ask questions or provide instructions. It's like onboarding a new employee raw without any experience. And you have to teach them and handhold them, which is a good thing. I think it improves communication and how we communicate. But still, there's always this missing piece that is driving a new chat. It's either a timeout or a wrong instruction or a missed information, and that triggers more chat. But to answer your question, Vince, yes, definitely less chats, better outputs within the same project.
Fully agree with that. I was playing with I've been a Claude girl for the last few months, but went back to OpenAI because I was home and wanted to do some stuff, some personal fun, make a logo for my friend's equestrian. Her daughter rides a horse, and prompted it well, I thought. Yeah, like I'm so aggressive with my prompts. It's kind of funny to think about, but prompted it well, came back with beautiful concepts, and then trying to have it actually then turn one of the, it came back with 6 concepts, turn one of the concepts into and take that forward into a brand book or a style guide. It just could not do it. Like it still could not execute. It kept changing. It kept messing up with visually the pieces of it. So I think like that's a really, and that was maybe I was 4 prompts deep before it started just losing its mind, and being unable to kind of replicate what it had initially created. The same thing with my dad. He does like irrigation and a lot of commercial kind of agricultural architecture, if you will. And a lot of the work that he does is with mixing chemicals. So a lot of scientific and mathematical formulas on what is needed to feed cattle at certain rates and things like that. And so it was interesting because on one side of the fence, right, where I live and breathe every day, the marketing, comms, creative side, extremely let down. But on the math and the calculation and science output that my dad would use it for, where he was trying to say, how much would I need for this to be this across, words I don't even know what it means. It's basically a pharmacist kind of conversation. It was fantastic. So again, I think it goes back to the models and where they're being trained and where the strengths have been put in foundationally to train them. Engineers are the ones building these things. So we're going to thrive there first. And then I still think the comms and creative side is catching up. And to Wada's point, the more you go on, the less, the more drift you get. So especially in the area of, loc and creative and comms and where it's not the first use case that's been developed for these foundational models and these LLMs.
That's interesting. I think I'm using 4 or 5 foundation models at any one time, so I'm swapping between them quite a lot, seeing different performance and different personalities out of each of them. And I think what's been really interesting for me is using Hermes as an agent that then switches the brain, that I can move it from one model to another, but it retains the memory, it retains the personality I've put into it. So it kind of allows me to run multiple queries, whatever. But I think what's most interesting about it is the way it saves its memory, the way the active memory updating in it is really interesting, and the skills. So, for example, I don't rely on prompts in the same way at all anymore. I'll ask my agent to come up with a proposal for how to go about something. I'll iterate with it. We'll run it if it's successful or if it needs tweak. And once, as soon as we have it that it's operational, we turn it into a skill. The skill goes into the Hermes agent, and then it's repeatable every time. It's kind of deterministic, or much closer to deterministic than even running the same prompt again, because you might just get a different strand of the LLM. So it's been kind of interesting to look at that and to look at self-improving agents. I think that really has helped with that long-term memory loss, I think.
But see, I think this is a really interesting part of this conversation. We're all in this industry living and breathing every day. I created my dad's ChatGPT account last week. Same for my friends. Like, that's the everyday user and everyday adopter. We work in technology where a little echo chamber of maybe 10% of the real global population of who is using this technology and how they're using it. And so I think that's an interesting shift, or maybe piece that is, I often personally overlook that with a lot of the foundational models, right? Like, we're 10 steps ahead in talking agents and talking how this is executed and talking enterprise and talking business. I can reference businesses that do multi-millions of dollars a year and they're still yet to open any sort of account. There's this blue collar, uprising where it's not a thing. It's not been needed. It's not been thought of, and especially outside of the US. So not to say that they're behind, but I think it's just the way that I remember it was the Super Bowl maybe 5 years ago. I was like showing my friends ChatGPT. I was like, how cool is this? I had the same thing with my dad last week. So it's interesting, how people like us have these conversations versus the everyday user. Truly, I think it's a little bit different still. And I think there's a fine line of how they keep usage friendly and adoption friendly to get, that 100% of the world using it versus how they support the 10% to keep growing and keep continuing to get to superintelligence or AGI.
I think that's it's a good point to transition, actually, because you were referring to how it is inside America, outside America. And interestingly enough, we introduced, over the last few weeks, we've introduced more and more of an agent panelist into the environment. And we've been, so for example, the Quickfire questions are now researched by our agent, our producer agent. And we've decided to elevate the agent a little bit to become a panelist, to actually kind of contribute to some of these conversations and to raise some of the questions. And so we tried it out this week for it to raise its signal. And actually, its signal, I think, has become the driver for the main topic this week. So I haven't got the voice worked out, so I'll pretend to be the robot today. But I think it's something that, if it proves good, we'd probably include it as an ongoing feature. So the question: the EU AI Act primary enforcement deadline hits on August the 2nd. So what, 3 weeks away or 2 weeks away from when this will be when this will be released. So LSPs deploying MT, LLMs and AI agents are deployers under the Act with legal binding obligations, human oversight, 6-month log rotation, vendor risk documentation in writing, and complete AI agent inventories. Fines up to 35 million or 7.7% of global turnover. So the question is the localization industry treating this as a legal department checkbox, or is the operational restructuring that it actually requires? Is the localization industry prepared? Jonas, do you want to kick off? Any thoughts?
I think it's interesting. The first sort of reaction is related to how different models respond to that, right? So what just asking different models what it means for the localization, the communication industry, this EU AI Act, I got very different responses. I'm not as sophisticated as you, Vincent, yet. I don't have Hermes doing it for me, so I was just switching between models. But I got a different response from Perplexity, from Claude, from ChatGPT, and so on. The actual impact on LSPs. I think the bottom line is that definitely the industry needs to really wake up to it. I don't think that there is enough discussion about it yet. I didn't go to Local. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there was any session around the EU AI Act, even though Local happened in Europe this time. And I haven't seen really a lot of communication about it in the usual channels either. Maybe taking a step back, the EU AI Act, I don't know if everyone's aware of it, but it is a new regulation around deploying AI and how we use AI and disclosure of having used AI. And I actually think that's a very important point there, the intention of the law, right? What are the EU trying to achieve with this? So it's not just to track AI usage or like flag when someone has used AI. It's of course to protect the EU citizens, and that is important for how the regulation will potentially impact LSPs as well. But long story short, I think the answer to your question is I don't think the industry is prepared yet, and I think everyone needs to realize that fast. But I think some of the statements from the agent as well are a little bit exaggerated. I think you didn't go through the full sort of input that we got through the agent, but it made it out to be a huge problem. I don't think that it's a huge problem, but it is definitely something that companies need to be aware of and need to research what it means for them. Because there are a lot of different LSPs as well, right? Some fine-tuned models, then for sure you need to be prepared for this. Then it does have big implications for you. But if you're just deploying neural machine translation, which is a form of AI, then it doesn't really change much for you.
So I think it's interesting that you pointed out that different agents will give different responses, and I kind of think that's an indicator that will depend on how the act is interpreted. I think it is a sliding scale, and in some cases you look at it and you kind of go, okay, that's a small item. But if they decided to be quite strict about the ruling, I think there's a lot of areas that would unexpectedly catch us. For example, you know, it will become illegal to use AI to grade resources if it means that perhaps that they would lose access to some jobs or whatever. And I kind of think, well, we've used computer-assisted grading and LQA reports for the long time now. It's kind of a part of the operational model to always try to monitor where translators are working best and to give them the opportunity to work best. And it could impact areas like that. You mentioned already fine-tuning. So, and it also, what's significant about it is it's not just what the LSP directly, how they engage with it. It's also to do with what the end client's data and what their engagement with it is. So if, for example, an LSP is supplying translations to legal or to the different regulated industries that it mentions, they effectively fall under the high-risk category and have to be compliant at that level. And quite a lot of LSPs with a mixed client list would have clients that will be involved to some degree on that. It was accurate enough to be kind of, or demanding enough to be kind of gone, even at a segment level, that there should be a full audit trail of who touched what A models were used in it, was A used in a review at any stage in it, and then does that mean if a translator uses their own offline account that's not regulated within the workflow model, does that put the LSP at risk? Strictly according to the law, it does. So just your thoughts.
And I think that's a bit the problem, Vincent. So first of all, we're not lawyers, we're not legal experts,
Yes,
right? So don't
that's
take
very
this as
polite.
legal advice to anyone who's listening to this. I think that's important to call out. But I think even that on the fine tuning, so the original interpretation from the agent was that, yeah, for sure, you would have to go through the EU database registration and so on, right? All those things would apply. But then I think, I don't know if it was Claude or Perplexity, came out with a very different interpretation of it, saying that that's overstated. So fine-tuning, and I'm reading here now just to make sure that I sort of reflect this accurately, but fine-tuning an open source model for medical translation, and you inherit full provider obligations was the statement from the agent. But according to the other model, this is only partially accurate but overstated. So you will be considered a provider of GPAI, so a general purpose AI, only if your modification leads to significant change in the generality of the model, the capabilities, and the systemic risk. And the rule of thumb apparently is, according also to the documentation from the EU, is that this is only the case if the compute used for fine-tuning is higher than 1/3 of the compute used to train the base model. That will definitely not be the case, right? The amount of compute used to train whatever GPT-5 or 4 or any of these models is massive. And you will not use anywhere near 1/3 of that amount of compute when you fine-tune a medical model for a specific customer. So I think the conclusion for me is that this is not settled yet. The interpretation of the law is not clear yet, which is sort of a good segue to another point that really stood out to me, is that they have the EU has what they call now the digital omnibus. I don't know where that name comes from, but they basically postpone a lot of the deadlines when the law will apply to end of 2027. So the high-risk use cases are pushed out because of the interpretation of the law being unclear at this point. Having said all that, obviously this is not like a get-out-of-jail-free card for the industry. You should definitely move fast now and make sure that you're ready, because there will be a lot of work to be prepared for it.
So interesting you asked about Lockworld. Again, this didn't come up at Lockworld, at least not in any of the conversations I have. With that, do you think, John says that he doesn't feel the industry is prepared, and my sense of it was it's not a common topic. Do you think the industry moved too quickly to implement some features and didn't really consider the bigger picture of where legislation or control is going to go in the longer term? Do you think we move too quickly and are now going to have to backfill some safer procedures, etc.? Why do you think that might be?
Oh, certainly. Do you mean we've built for convenience instead of accountability and governance?
Yeah, and also maybe not just convenience, but maybe for, a short return. Everybody wants a cheaper rate immediately, so we're not kind of reinvesting and thinking long term.
Certainly. If you look at the enterprise level buyer landscape, the goal of rolling out AI across the enterprise had to do with time to market, reducing cost, collapsing workflows, and in many areas, reducing FTEs. And they were able to achieve some of that, or the majority of that, through AI. But then after execution, things started to surface in terms of guardrails, accountability, governance issues. And these conversations are happening right now. Like, okay, how do we add more guardrails around the AI output? But also, we want to be mindful of convenience versus accountability. Is it really the enemy? Is convenience the enemy of accountability? Because if you have an accountability layer that adds friction and impacts time to market, it will simply be switched off or defunded quietly. So a system that is accountable but inconvenient is not accountable in practice. And this is where we need the balance. The danger is not automation itself. It's building localization or even marketing systems where speed, scale, and cost reductions are being measured, but harm, distortion, bias, exclusions are not. The reality is that no single employee chooses convenience or speed or time to market over accountability. Product wants the throughput. Finance wants margin. Engineering wants the ticket close. The question is, are they willing to sacrifice some convenience to enforce some accountability measures that might slow down the process?
Do you think we can really ensure accountability? Like, realistically, if we move to more and more agentic workflows and the agents self-learn, well, then each agent effectively has a local memory which could impact its performance, etc. And who knows where it will be pulling some of its memory from cumulatively over a period of time. So it may be impossible to actually really determine where did that translation or where did that piece of content come from.
Hallucination is real. It's still happening. Until we get to a point where we eliminate hallucination, then we can have this conversation.
Interesting. Karina, let's just kind of broaden it out a little bit, or you can jump in if you want, but I kind of think it's interesting. Australia's brought in some rules around restricting use of social media, etc. I think so there's a movement there. And I think then with the regulatory information, not just from the EU, but also, as you can see now with, say, the Mythos models or, the more regulatory position that the US government has taken around newer models, etc. What's your sense on that level of pushback? Do you think that it's been successful in Australia around the social media? Can we learn any lessons from that around applying to the AI?
One thing that I think is make or break in enterprise deals when it comes to selling AI. So compliance is becoming a go-to-market motion, not a back office function anymore. I want to start with that kind of like concept. But I'm going to read now. So the LSPs and the AI data companies that productize their compliance infrastructure, and I'm going to plug ourselves here at Scientific for a second here. This is something we pride ourselves on, right? AIDF is something that is built for traceability, audit, being able to audit exactly why and how things happened. They will eat the enterprise market. The ones treating it as a legal checkbox, they'll disappear very quickly over the next 18 months. I think this is a non-negotiable. And I think this is something that, regardless of whether or not the EU AI Act has impacted this is something like enterprise AI adoption it's nowhere near where the world thought it would be. And I really do think that the one blocker is the lack of traceability, accountability, and governance. And so those that can build that in as a layer that is a non-negotiable and not a back office function, but a function that is responsible holistically, I think they'll be the winners.
Yeah. 100%. And I think we've talked about sort of opportunities for the language industry in past episodes. And honestly, the entire EU AI Act is about governance, right? And documentation and so on. And that's where we excel as an industry. It is a huge opportunity to own that conversation and not look at it as a risk, but as an opportunity to not just as a marketing or a way of working, but actually going beyond the work that the typical LSP does today into something else to support this kind of thing.
And I think it goes back to that trust loop, right? If you don't have that trust loop, that context loop, that the adoption just does not happen. And for when we think about who at the end of the day in the C-suite is signing off on these deals, it's your InfoSec, it's your IT, and that's what they care about is the ability for traceability, governance, and compliance. And that's something that is, if it is an afterthought, you will not win that RFP. You will not succeed, and you will be eaten up by those that do build it in as a foundational layer of their offering. So that's my stance on that. In Australia, I love the social media ban for the under 16-year-olds. I would hate it if I was under 16, but I think that's kind of a different conversation. I think, I'm not well versed enough on that to comment. And I know that they're being cheeky and they're finding workarounds. My opinion stands that anyone who builds this in foundationally, the governance layer, they will win. That will be the make or break for the future of not only LSP companies, but any AI company, which will be every tech company shortly.
Brilliant. I think that's a good point to leave it, guys. We've hit our target time frame. Very interesting conversation today. Thanks everybody for coming. I think maybe we'll just do a quick recommendation each before we go. And maybe like and subscribe or do all the things that you're supposed to do to podcasts. Jonas, do you want to go first with your recommendation?
I've talked about this before, and I posted on LinkedIn about it. I'm going to do it again. So check out machinereaders.com. I think it's the fascinating thing. I won't go through the full background again, but it's essentially a digital art installation, right? And it's kind of added a new layer now around alignment, but I'll leave it at that. Check it out.
I shared with you guys a very interesting report launched by PwC last week around how AI is impacting industries. And we've had several reports, right, in that space. But this one is unique. What I like about it is that it has an interactive world map. So you want to access it on your laptop, not on your phone, because you can click per country and it shows you how AI is impacting jobs and also entry-level jobs, which aligns perfectly with one of the topics we had a few weeks ago around that same job reduction or entry-level reduction. So check it out. I think you'll like it.
I'm going to go so left of center here and say Project Hail Mary, the movie. It is such a heartfelt movie, and I have never cried so much, so many happy tears. There's a little bit of a language theme there. I don't know who's watched it. Anyone? Have you guys watched it yet?
Happy tears, Karina. Come on, spoilers.
Sad tears too. Has anyone watched it? Am I the only one who's watched it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
You're the only one so far.
Oh my gosh. It is, I would say, one of my top 5 favorite movies ever. Maybe top 3. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there's a little bit of a language play there. There's a little bit of, one planet to another and learning to communicate. And I think it is a real feel-good movie. And it's been a minute since I went to the movies and watched something like that. And it was really nice to do that.
Brilliant. I'm going to go fairly left field as well. I didn't really have time to think of a recommendation this week. So my recommendation is take a break. It'll all still be here when you get back. So it's getting into the depths of summer.
Love it.
It's hot and it's sweaty. You're okay to take a break sometime this week and come back around to it a few hours later when you've had a chance to recover. Okay, guys, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us in the Signal Room. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.